Let's talk some chess. This game took place all the way back in 1857 in the Big Apple, New York, New York. It's part of the first American Chess Congress, which was the predecessor to the U.S. Championship. Essentially, the 16 best American players were invited to play a single elimination bracket-style tournament. This is the final match of the tournament. Paul Morphy's playing with the black pieces, one of our favorite chess players in history, and Louis Paulsen playing with the white pieces, and Paulsen opens us up with e4. We have e5 from Morphy, knight to f3, knight to c6, knight to c3, and knight to c6. And if this looks familiar, that's because this is the four knights game, so stuff you commonly seen today, probably you see it in your games. Pretty cool that such a common opening was played all the way back 170 years ago, but that's the magic of chess. And now bishop to b5 played by Paulsen, attacking this knight on c6. Looks a bit like the Ruy Lopez. You have a bishop attacking the knight on c6. You have a knight on f3. But you also have these two knights on c3 and f6, so this is referred to as the Spanish four knights game, where you have the four knights and the next move is bishop to b5. Here Morphy plays bishop to c5, preparing the bishop in case Paulsen castles kingside. This bishop will pin the f2 pawn to the king, and spoiler alert, Paulsen does castle kingside on the next move, and Morphy responds in kind. And now Paulsen decides to go ahead and capture the pawn on e5, and this looks like an interesting move. It looks like you're sacrificing a knight on e5 because Morphy's knight can take back, but this doesn't work. You don't win your piece back because then Paulsen can just play d4, and this forks the bishop and the knight. If the bishop takes, then the queen takes, and you're totally fine. The recommended move here is just retreating the bishop, and then the pawn can take the knight on e5. So not a true knight sacrifice, and Morphy doesn't want to allow Paulsen to get this d4 move in. So instead of capturing with the knight, he just plays a very Morphy-like move, rook to e8. Getting the rook on the semi-open file, attacking the knight which is undefended, and Paulsen here responds with knight takes on c6. Morphy captures back with a pawn on d takes on c6. And now this is a nice move because it's opened up the semi-open file for the queen. It's attacking this bishop on b5, forcing the bishop to retreat, which the bishop does to c4. And now this is a nice bishop on c4. It's pinning the f7 pawn to the king, and Morphy, of course, does not want that and plays b5 here. And it looks like you're obviously attacking the bishop, and it looks like the bishop can just retreat to b3. The problem is if you retreat the bishop to b3, then Morphy has this bishop to g4 move, developing a piece and attacking the queen on d1. The knight is protecting the bishop, so the queen can't take back, or the knight will capture the queen. So here the proper move is just to sort of move the queen to e2, but then you can't really play this f3 move. You can't play it at all because don't forget about this bishop on c5, which is pinning the pawn to the king, so you can't just play f3 to block the light squared bishop. Instead, you retreat the queen to e1, but now you get, after this b4 move, kicking the knight away from the defense of the e4 pawn, forcing the knight back to d1. Now knight takes on e4, and this is just clearly a monstrous position for Morphy. You have the two bishops, just zooming in on Paulsen's camp. The knight's ready to move away and open up a discovered attack from the rook to the queen, and this is just much, much better. So Paulsen definitely doesn't want to go into this. Instead, he plays bishop to e2, which is the proper move, guarding against this g4 square. So now Morphy can't just play bishop to g4 and go into that really powerful line. So interesting to note there, because it does look like the bishop can just retreat to b3, but that would be disastrous for Paulsen. So bishop to e2, and now knight takes on e4, and now Morphy has won his pawn back, and he has a very excellent knight on e4. He has a bishop eyeing the enemy king. He has a queen and a rook on a semi-open and an open file. The rook is on an open e-file, and so a very pleasant position for Morphy to play. We have knight takes on e4, rook takes on e4, and now bishop to f3, trying to get rid of this very active rook on the fourth rank, and Morphy retreats the rook to e6, protecting the c6 pawn, which is attacked by the bishop, because in this position the bishop is skewering the rook to the pawn, so the rook can just defend it by going to the sixth rank. Now we have c3 by Paulsen. Probably has ideas here of playing d4 and getting this bishop off of this important diagonal. Sorry, my mouse is being weird. Getting this bishop off of this important diagonal. But this was the first move that, this is an okay position for Paulsen. You can make this position work. But this move, unfortunately, starts to break the position down. And the problem is it's a fine idea to try to get this this d4 move in, but Morphy can prevent that d4 move, and he does by playing queen to d3. And this move is great for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, it prevents d4, right? The pawn cannot move through the queen. this move is only possible because Paulsen played c3, because currently the pawn is protecting d3, but after the pawn moves, the queen is safe on d3. And now you just have an excellent queen that's just super threatening, attacking all of these pieces, and it's a very difficult queen to kick away from this square. You can't play bishop to e2 attacking the queen, because then rook just takes bishop, and you're down a piece if queen, if queen takes, and that's fine for Morphy. So taking advantage of the weakness on this d3 square, preventing d4, and this queen is incredibly hard to kick away. So a really nice move here for Morphy. Instead of d4 now, Paulsen plays b4, trying to get after this bishop. Morphy just retreats it, and now a4 by Paulsen, trying to open up on the queen side. B takes on a4, queen takes on a4, trying to get some counterplay. Now there are two pieces threatening this c6 pawn, but Morphy, of course, doesn't care about the pawn. He makes it look like he cares about the pawn, and he does protect it with bishop to d7. I spoke too soon. But I think we can probably infer that Morphy doesn't care so much about the pawn. He more just wants to develop this bishop and get it into the game. But he does protect the pawn, because Morphy, I guess, can do both. So props to Morphy. And here we have rook to a2 by Paulsen. There's not really many moves you can make here, but adding some protection to this d2 pawn. Maybe this bishop wants to move away at some point, even though it's going to be hard to get this bishop out. And you can just see already, like, this bishop is completely hemmed in by these pawns. It's not very active. It's not doing much of anything, whereas Morphy's dark squared bishop is incredibly powerful. And so Morphy using the pieces to his advantage. Even the queens. I mean, this queen is on a4, not controlling many squares at all, whereas Morphy's queen is on d3 and just very threatening in the enemy camp. So again, Morphy making most of his pieces. And there is one piece that Morphy has that's not really achieving much, but Morphy fixes that on the next move with rook a to e8. And now you have the two rooks forming a battery on the open e file. And now this is just super fun position for Morphy to play. Here Paulsen plays queen to a6 and offers up a queen trade, so Morphy can take the queen if he so chooses. And this was kind of the critical moment in the position. Morphy took a long time to think here. I think the notes say that he took like 12 minutes to think. If you plug this position into an engine, it says one move, and then after it thinks a bit, it says another move. So take a second here, pause, see if you can find the move that Morphy played that sent this game into the history books, while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, it is fine to play a queen trade here. Queen takes queen, rook takes queen, and now Morphy, the material is equal, but Morphy has much more active and much better pieces, and that's totally fine. That's what the engine recommends after looking at this position for a couple of seconds. But if you really stare at this position long enough, you find the correct move, which Morphy found and played, and it's a beautiful queen sacrifice. It's queen takes on f3, capturing the bishop on f3, and just a crazy position to play in a game of this, this magnitude. You're not necessarily threatening anything here. I mean, there's no immediate threat of mate, but the queen has just captured a bishop, and Morphy is now up a piece, so you pretty much have to accept this queen sacrifice, which Paulsen does. G takes on f3, but now the idea behind Morphy's move is clear. The G file is open, and Morphy is able to play rook to g6 with check. And now again, in this position, before the queen sacrifice, the G file is super closed. The pawn on G2 is there. The bishop is protecting the pawn, so there's just no chance of this rook coming over to the G file and creating an attack. But after the queen sacrifice, not only takes the bishop, which is protecting the pawn, but moves the pawn away from the G file, and now bishop to G6. I'm sorry, rook to G6 is very powerful. The king has one move, has to move to H1, but now you get sort of the idea that you had to see, which is bishop to H3. Now attacking this rook on f1, and now it's sort of difficult to figure out how to defend here. The proper way to defend, I think, is queen to d3, getting the queen sort of back into the game, but it's kind of a boring line. We're not going to go into that too much here. Paulsen just plays rook to d1, trying to get the rook out of harm's way, And why not rook to e1, you ask? Well, because don't forget about Morphy's rook on e8. If you play rook to e1, then this is just checkmate. Rook takes rook, and the king has nowhere to go, and the game's over. So tries to save this rook, but not obviously get checkmated, and plays rook to d1, getting out of harm's way. But now we have a wonderful windmill here by Morphy. Bishop to g2 with check. The king has one move, which is to g1. And now one of my favorite types of moves in chess, the bishop sidestep. Bishop captures on f3, and you get a discovered check from the rook on g6. The king, again, has just one square to move to. It's always good when you're forcing your opponent to make a single move, because you can very accurately predict what they will do. The bishop's taking away the h1 square, so the king has to move to f1 instead. And here Morphy repeats the same idea, bishop to g2. The king can't run to e1 or e2 because, again, this rook is cutting that file off. So back to g1, and now bishop to h3 with another discovered check from the rook. And here, instead of sidestepping to f3, the bishop's now on h3, and the king has to go to h1. And now Morphy's central idea, bishop takes on f2. So Morphy essentially does this dance with the bishop, where he removes this pawn on f3. We'll see why that's important soon, and then is able to sort of force the king to the corner. A really nice, a very just accurate move. Instead of putting the bishop on f3, which gets the king to f1, because then the king has to obviously run to f1. Instead, bishop to h3, king is forced to h1 because the bishop is covering f1. King retreats, and now bishop takes on f2. And we'll continue this line in a moment. I did want to note, after bishop to g2, after the king ran to f1 here, there was a better move here for Morphy that leads to a faster sort of finish. It's actually a forced checkmate. That move is rook to g2, a wonderful little kind of rook lift, although I guess the rook is already lifted on the 6th rank. And the threat here is, no matter what you do here with the white pieces, let's say you play queen to e2, well, it's actually not a good example because then bishop takes, but let's say you play rook to a4, then you're going to get rook takes on h2, and now there's no way to prevent this rook to h1 checkmate. The bishop is cutting off the g2 square. The king can even move to g1, but then rook to h1 is checkmate because the bishop is protecting the rook. And even if the king doesn't move, if the rook moves again, this is checkmate because the bishop's cutting off these two squares. The rook is checking the king, and even the rook on e8 is pitching in and covering the e1 square twice. So just a really nice kind of frustrating checkmate to play against, because there's no way to stop this. You can give away your pieces. I forget what the mate is here. If queen to e2, I actually don't even know if you take here. I forget, but this, bishop takes looks, let me see, let's just see. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rook takes, and then it's the exact same idea. Whatever you do here, checkmate is coming. You can't stop rook to h1 with checkmate. So that's the idea. That's the, if you want to give away all your pieces, you can, but there's no way to stop this threat. So that's the checkmate in the position. Morphy didn't see it, but honestly, I think his finishing combination is more stylish, so kudos to Morphy for being a more aesthetic player. We have the king on h1, we have the bishop taking on f2, and now Morphy plays, Paulsen plays queen to f1, desperately trying to give material back. And you'll notice that Paulsen is still up material. He has a queen for a bishop, but obviously these rooks and these bishops are much, much better. This king is not safe at all. Morphy's king is incredibly safe behind these 3 pawns, so the material advantage doesn't matter. And Paulsen wants to give up material here and try to ease the pressure of the attack. Morphy accepts. He takes on f1. We have rook takes on f1, and now the material is equal, 2 rooks and a bishop for both sides. But now Morphy plays sort of the rook lift idea, rook to e2, protecting this bishop on f2. And note that Morphy doesn't have to worry about back rank mate here, because the pawn on a7 is blocking the rook from getting to a8 and delivering eventually a checkmate against Morphy's king. So rook to a1, adding protection on the first rank for Paulsen, but now rook to h6, a really slow, but sort of, maybe not slow, but a really important move for Morphy, as we'll see in just a couple of seconds. And here Paulsen doesn't really have, many good moves. He plays d4, which is a reasonable move. It opens up an attack from the bishop to the rook on h6, so maybe hoping to get some counterplay, get this bishop developed, maybe even to f4 where it can protect the h2 pawn. But here Morphy essentially ends the game with his second, what I think is a brilliant move, second brilliant move in this game. So see if you can take a moment and finish the game here for Morphy. I was just checking when the game ended, and it was after this move. This was the final move of the game, and it was bishop to e3. And in this position, Louis Paulsen resigned. So this was the last move of the game. The threat here is too great, and let's talk about why the threat is too great. So of course, the bishop is now blocking Paulsen's bishop from attacking the rook on h6. What's the threat here? Let's say you just ignore this move and just play a silly move, c4. Then you get checkmate in one. You can get it two ways. Either rook captures on h2, and this is checkmate. The rook is checking the king, cutting off this square as well. It's protected by its fellow rook, and the bishop is covering g1. So that's you have this threat of checkmate if you just ignore. You can play with the other rook too if you just ignore this move. What happens if you capture this bishop? So bishop captures bishop. Well, then you just get a very similar idea. Rook takes on h2, and here you take with the h6 rook. Rook takes on h2, king to g1, and now rook to g2, and this is checkmate because now the rooks are teaming up. The Paulsen's rook on f1 is blocking the king from escaping, and the game is over. So you can't just take this bishop here on e3, and unfortunately, there's no real other way to defend. You might think, okay, can I put the bishop on a2, and now I'm, now if Morphy plays rook e takes on h2, this doesn't work because if rook takes back on h2, but of course Morphy wouldn't play this. He would checkmate with his other rook on h6, rook takes, and now the white rook on a2 cannot get to this rook on h2 because it's blocked by the rook on e2. So this is just checkmate. So the fact that Morphy can checkmate with both of these rooks makes this a winning position. Here, the best move is just to give up your rook on f2 and completely sell out. Now you are blocking. Now Morphy doesn't have checkmate on h2 because the white rook is blocking. But of course here you can just capture the rook with your rook on f2, and now here. Paulsen can capture the bishop on e3, but now just rook takes on h2 with check. After the king moves to g1, rook to h1 check, and now after the king moves, you're going to pick up the rook on a1, and Morphy will have two rooks for bishop, and this is just a massive material advantage. So Paulsen, of course, sees this after the bishop to e3 move, and he resigns the game, and fantastic game, obviously a great win for Morphy. I'm not sure if this was the final game of the match, but Morphy did go on to win the first American Chess Congress, basically naming him the U.S. champion. He was offered a prize of $300 according to Wikipedia, but he turned it down, although he did accept like some beautiful silver plates or something like that. But Wikipedia will tell you more about that. But an awesome game. I definitely think that queen takes on f3 with the bishop was just a very special move. And as always, just a real pleasure to watch Morphy play chess. Just really elegant, very intuitive, but very exciting game. So an awesome player. So thanks for watching. Hope you liked. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you liked it as well. But hope you enjoyed. Drop a like, drop subscribe. Let me know of other games you'd like me to review, and we'll see you next time.